I think that's the real beauty of documentary filmmaking is just like having a good excuse to follow your curiosity. I mean, it's almost like ridiculous, like when you say that it's a job, like because who else really? What other profession allows you to do that?
You are listening to Talk Doc to Me, a podcast and community dedicated to helping documentary filmmakers thrive. I'm your host and fellow filmmaker, Leah and today's guest is Ömer Sami. Calling in from Copenhagen, Ömer is a filmmaker of British, Irish, and Turkish descent. His latest film, Eternal Father, released with The New Yorker, was shortlisted for an Academy Award. He studied psychology from UCLA and graduated from the National Film School of Denmark. Currently, he is developing his first feature documentary. Today, we are discussing the intersection of psychology and documentary, his latest film, and what it's like to make documentaries in Denmark/across Europe. It's so awesome to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Leah.
Awesome. So I want to start with psychology and documentary. And I feel like this is a really interesting intersection because I feel like all documentary filmmakers have to have some sort of interest in psychology naturally because it's real life. You're dealing with real people. There's a lot of I work with my husband, and we kind of say there's a lot of like psychological warfare going on, like during the whole process of making a film. So I'm curious, what drew you to psychology in the first place?
I think it began with an interest in people generally, and the cliche of walking around or sitting on a bus and just wondering, what is it like to be this specific person in this moment of time? And I think when I began to study psychology, I realized like that wasn't the approach, and it was much more kind of academic, and I appreciated that, but it was more from a kind of cognitive perspective, and I was
very
studying,
academic.
I was studying specifically like consciousness and memory and attention, which I found stimulating, but at a certain point I felt like there were all these frameworks that had been created, and instead of kind of challenging the whole way of thinking about it, they would just kind of integrate new knowledge into this existing framework, and it just kind of became about a little bit of an ego project of whose framework is correct. And at some point I stopped finding that interesting, and I began watching a lot of character driven films, and I was like, oh, can you also do this? I mean, this allows you to explore big topics from a subjective point of view without having to pretend that you're kind of objectively studying something or coming with any kind of objective truth. Um, and I'd grown up in England watching a lot of BBC documentaries, which were quite dry, but the stuff that I started watching was very rooted in a specific character, and so I think that's what opened the door to me. And then I just realized that that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Afterwards, yeah. And then when you realize, okay, psychology is not quite it, it's kind of too academic, I like the idea of documentary filmmaking. What was, a big milestone for you to make that transition?
So I'm not a film buff. I didn't grow up watching very many films. I think, my household, my parents were like, if they saw me lying on a sofa watching TV, it was like a kind of the devil's curse, or like, get up, stop being lazy. So I've just always associated like sitting watching stuff as being lazy. So I had to also kind of allow myself to, it was like okay to just watch films and I could learn something from. So I just began watching a lot of stuff. I think I knew I was interested in documentaries. And then after that, I interned at Sundance for the documentary fund program, which I found really interesting because that kind of gave me an insight into how do you talk about documentaries? How do you present an idea? And all those questions about how do you write a proposal? I was just getting like on the receiving end of all of that stuff. And I was watching a lot of like work in progress, which I think is
So
very rare that you
helpful.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But at some point I felt that um my standards were way above my own ability, and I found that paralyzing. And I was like, if I ever want to make my own things, I need to just I can either like continue doing this, but it's not the same as filmmaking. It's something different. So if I want to make films, I need to stop doing this and actually just get my hands on it. And I think that was quite daunting, like the fact of um having some kind of experience, but like you have to go through the process of making a lot of really bad stuff,
Right.
which is kind of hurts your pride.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of people can relate to that where you watch things, you have an internal like palette, if you will, for really great cinematic, great storytelling, but you're like, "Whoa, I don't know how to do that." Or you start doing it yourself, you're like, "Wow, this is actually really hard." There's like so much that goes into it. So I feel like that's a really relatable kind of feeling. I felt personally that way honestly like for at least like 5 or 6 years before I felt like my taste in what I liked watching and what I thought I was capable of doing would actually like show up in my work. you know,
mm,
like I think it takes a long time, yeah, to get there. And you just, to your point, you kind of have to just like start making films.
exactly, and that's I think that the older you get, the more embarrassing that is. And I felt like time was running out. Like I just had to do it now. And there's a kind of a nice excuse of being a student that you're learning. Um, yeah, and I mean I think also just I didn't have any friends that were making films, so just the whole thing of like how do you actually do this? I was just like a one man band trying to do everything myself. I think it would have like been helpful to have like a bunch of friends where like we could have helped each other. Um, yeah, I mean that was my entry point, and then
Yeah.
I just s- moved to Copenhagen. I don't know if I'm hopping too far ahead, but
No, no, go for it.
um, yeah, I ended up moving here because I fell in love with a Danish girl and moved here like temporarily, and then ended up finding out that it was a really good place to make films. And I interned at Final Cut for Real, which made The Act of Killing and Look of Silence. Um, and there's it's a rare place where there's a film industry and government funding, so it's actually a pretty healthy like ecosystem for making documentaries. And then I just started making stuff. Started making stuff that I would send to the Guardian, and they picked up some of it. um so it was very much just like learning by doing, really.
Right. And right place and right time. I feel like you had enough opportunities to, be around the right type of people and then, just start making your films and putting them out there. That's cool. Is there anything else you want to add about like psychology and documentary filmmaking? Do you think there's, based on what you did learn in psychology, is there anything that documentary filmmakers can draw from psychology?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always I don't think I consciously use any of the knowledge that I learned while studying psychology, but I think in a greater sense, I'm very interested in like characters' psychology and, um, as I said, what it's like to be a specific person experiencing a specific kind of thing, and that helps me kind of make a lot of choices in the films that I make of like whose perspective are we experiencing this through? Because I think if I just approach something like a kind of I don't know, a topic or something from this like you know um
Kind of like too
omnipotent
much of a bird's eye
perspective.
view. Too much of a bird's
Yeah,
eye view. Like you need to kind of decide which perspective you're telling it from.
exactly. And I think there's some people that are really good at doing those kind of things, or just like distance. But for me, I need to like experience it through one person's eyes. And so I'm constantly kind of trying to figure out like, is this aligned with their way of seeing the world? And um, I think, you know, maybe it's actually closer to like phenomenology than it is to psychology of like this. I think what film can do that no other medium can do is to give you a sense of like lived experience, and it just like it goes through a special kind of channel straight into your amygdala, and like you just sense it before understanding it intellectually. And so I think um that's really hard to come up with a recipe, or like I think things that make sense in film can make sense just intuitively without understanding why. And it's often like when film critics try to dissect it that I don't believe that filmmakers think in that way. I think that's kind of retrospective thinking often. Um, so I see them as two different things, like film analysis and film critique, and filmmaking as like um, yeah. Um,
Almost like your intuition. Like it's sort of like I kind of think of it as like a filmmaker's maybe like sixth sense of like story.
mm,
Like it's sort of hard, and it's obviously depends on each particular project. And I would love to start talking about Eternal Father soon here, and we can use that
mm,
as an example. But like you kind of like you have to trust your gut in a lot of things. There's a lot of with documentary. There's so many moving parts. There's a lot of real life problems and dynamics and ethics and everything, that there's a lot of
mm.
decisions that like micro decisions that you make throughout the whole process that kind of make it that lived experience that you're saying. Like you kind of just have to have this like yeah intuition about like the way you move and act and do things
Yeah, no,
potentially.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that this kind of academic approach to the world um, is, I found it at least comforting that you could distance yourself and hide behind this kind of pretense of, we're examining something at an arm's length. But I think with film, especially documentary filmmaking, you're so immersed in it that you like, yeah, I think what you said about intuition um, is so true. Like it is about like, why am I the right person to be telling this story, and what is it that draws me to this? Like you have to. It took me a long time to try and like backtrack all of that way of thinking and really kind of get in touch with like who am I as a filmmaker, and what is it that um both what is it that excites me, but like what are the things that I have a perspective on, or like that I should be telling that someone else couldn't. And I think if you want to go like extend the whole psychology in filmmaking, I think working with a team as well is a lot about um yeah, I guess that's kind of leadership psychology of like how do you motivate people, and with your subjects, of course, your participants, like um yeah, what is the contract that you have with them? And I think that's a whole other discussion of like the
Yeah.
complexities of um yeah.
Yeah, the filmmaker and participant relationship for sure. That could be a whole
Mm.
another episode. I wanna segue into the Eternal Father. For those that haven't watched it yet, can you describe what the film is about, and then also what it's really about?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's on the surface level about cryonics, which is the practice of freezing people after death in order to come back to life one day in the future. And so the film is centered around a father who's had kids late in life, who is afraid he's not going to be able to see his children grow up. So he decides to be cryonically preserved when he dies in order to secure more time with his family. And so it's less about the kind of technology of cryonics, and more about how we all deal with the prospect of our own mortality, and how we understand death, and how far we're willing to go to secure more time with the people that we love.
And I read in some articles that you first went to some cryonics meetings to get started. Can you explain like what was like the first cryonics meeting that you went to, and also like why did you do this?
It was a film school project. So yeah, I didn't mention that I went to the Danish film school, um, and then you have to make a graduation film, and I think sometimes like having those deadlines is a good thing of like you have to make this film. You can't wait around for like the inspiration. And we had these meetings where we had to pitch an idea and I didn't have any idea, but I began speaking about like um my grandma who's 92 and watching her with my niece who's 9 years old and wondering like what does my niece think about my grand's death? What does she think is going to happen on the other side? Does she believe in an afterlife? So I had all of those questions whirling around my head, and then I'd heard about cryonics, um, but to be honest, I had a specific idea of like what someone who made that decision would look like, but I just blurted it out loud. I was like, yeah, I mean, maybe we can make a film about cryonics, and then I thought like I have to just go and see for myself what this looks like, and I found a photo series from a British photographer, um, and I really like this kind of combination between the lo-fi and like all of these meetings were taking place in very cozy, quaint village halls with like carpet, but they were doing this very like futuristic simulation. And yeah, I found this Facebook group, um, and it's quite hard to get in. So I just kind of turned up as a normal person who was just
Right.
interested in cryonics.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd let you in if you said you were a documentary filmmaker to
No,
begin with.
I think like they've had some bad experiences with people coming in and taking the piss of them and then like writing an article, and so they are quite like guarded, understandably. Um, so I just went approaching it. Sometimes I just do that. Like there's nothing to lose. Like um, um, and I probably went to 3 or 4, and there's only 4 in a year, and I couldn't really find someone that really interested me. I think usually the films I make are from like, you know, one family or one person, and there was like a few people, but maybe it would be like a mosaic film, but it was somehow too easy to understand like why they wanted to go at a second life. Maybe they were very lonely or life hadn't worked out, and so they wanted another go. I just thought like, okay, how you so quickly understand that there's not really like a journey to go on. And then at the very last meeting, um, I met NASA, who is the main character of the film, and he had brought his kids along. So there was 4 kids, him and his wife, and just watching the kids look at all of this equipment and these like standby procedures where they practice almost like a first aid demonstration. I could see there was so much going on in their imagination, and I love experiencing things through kids generally. I think they have an interesting kind of unfiltered view on the world. So then I thought like, okay, there's some potential here. Like, uh, he doesn't seem like the normal kind of person that would do this, and there was a lovely warmth and openness between them. So I just approached him and said like, I would love to just chat to you some more about why you're here today. And I don't know how much like I need to go into detail about like you know, I think it's like striking up a friendship or a
Yeah, yeah.
romantic relationship. Like really,
You
I
have to
never
feel
go
it
in
out
like
first. You can't like come swinging and be like, I want to make a documentary about you. What do you think? You just met me. You can't really do
exactly,
that.
exactly. I mean, that's really intimidating, and like you don't know what you're signing up to. What does that even mean? Like, and most people, you don't know what their idea of a documentary could be. Is it like the some horrendous investigative journalistic
Right.
like
What are the intentions or what it, and also at that point as a filmmaker, you don't really know where it's going to end up. You have no idea that your film maybe could be Oscar shortlisted. You know, you're not going to,
mm,
you don't know where the end goes. So I think to your point, yeah, you definitely have to start a friendship first or just like start that relationship.
mm,
Yeah. I would a side tangent while you were telling this story. My one experience of showing up to a like club meeting of sorts was this was a like kind of spec piece that I was doing last year, all about I was looking for 4 female characters and their relationship with the 4 elements, so earth, water, fire, and air.
Mm.
And we were brainstorming some topics, and we're like, oh, like maybe someone that is a, mushroom farmer would be really interesting. Like a mycologist or something. So I just, to your point, I just started Googling. I live in San Diego, so I started Googling like San Diego mycology. And then I found that there was a club meeting actually that same day at like 4:30, like only maybe like 30 minutes from my house. And I was like, this is weird. Like, and I also too was working on a deadline. So I was like, I wonder if I just show up to this mycology meeting and I just learn about mushrooms, and worst case, I don't meet anyone interesting, but best case, I find like the exact person I'm looking for that's like really passionate about mushrooms. And so I went to the meeting, and it's just such a, I mean, when you meet new people that you're not necessarily like part of that world, it's just always so interesting. So I was like, oh, like, wow, okay, they had these mushrooms out, met people. We ended up actually not like choosing her for the final film, but that experience really taught me like, yeah, like you can basically just Google anything, Facebook group
Mm.
anything, and just like show up to a club meeting and as a normal person,
Hmm.
just say that you're interested in cryonics or say that you're interested in mushrooms. And that's just going to get you in the room with the people that might, be interesting to talk about, or they might know someone that, could
Mm.
recommend you to somebody else. So it's like the best type of research, I feel like, that you could do as a documentary filmmaker is just like show up to, a community event or something and just start talking to people. So I love
Absolutely.
that story of just showing up to cryonics meetings. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like same for yours. I think sometimes the film finds you, not the other way around. Like, and I'm sure that even though she didn't end up in the film, like, um, something will stick with you, or like um, I mean, think about the kind of team that it would have taken like 20 years ago to like facilitate or like to find that group and to get you there and stuff. Like it's, um, I think that's the real beauty of documentary filmmaking is just like having a good excuse to follow your curiosity. I mean, it's almost like ridiculous, like when you say that it's a job, like because who else really? What other profession allows you to do that?
I think your line of thinking is very similar to mine, actually. When you even said like, getting interested in just like everyday people, like what they do, like that's basically the same thought process that I had. And I think there was a film professor that said like documentary filmmaking is basically just an excuse to follow your curiosity. So that same like sentiment I feel like is so true, because you can, I mean, the world is your oyster. It's amazing what
Mm,
people are able to open up if you do it in the right way. People want to tell their story. People want to like share their experiences, and there's no there's no shortage of interesting things that you could just go out and start, finding out about. So I think that's awesome.
mm, mm.
Other questions about Eternal Father. Um, Something about documentary filmmaking that's interesting is, the process as a filmmaker, how you change during the course of filming and editing, and now having a lot of people react to the film too. I'm curious, what what have you learned about yourself during this process?
That's a good question. I think by some kind of miracle, almost everyone on our crew had a kid, like after making the film, or like the children were conceived during the production, not with the other team members. But
Yeah.
so I don't know if that's like coincidence that we're around that age that that's happening, but I think like I don't believe that's the case. I think I went from uh, being like, I could not imagine myself having a kid at this moment in life to suddenly like being like, I could actually foresee that. Um, that's hard to put my finger on specifically what. I think the film is kind of about the importance of being present right now while we're still alive with the people that we love, and um, I think that that's the yeah, that's important to me when I approach something, is that I'm genuinely surprised in the process. Like, I don't want to come in to begin a process with some idea and then just have it confirmed. Um, in that sense, I'm not trying to like convey a message. I think that I'm approaching it openly, and that um, it was um, complex with NASA's family because on the one hand he's made this decision to try to come back to life, and he's fighting um, this, and that's taking up a lot of mental space. That like time is running out. I need to do this, and the whole denial of death takes up a lot of space in his family. But at the same time, as a family, they are really present, and like if one of them goes to get a haircut, all the family go and they just sit around and chat. Like no one's on their phone, and that I think was like one of the most striking moments for me. Like, um, and it was like there was some long haircuts. Like the barber was really taking his time. Like we were probably in there for 1.5 hours filming the him and his son get a haircut, and I think I'm someone who has this like feeling of like I need to be productive. I need to make every moment worth it. And I think because I was like I felt, my task is to make the film, and that includes spending time with them off camera and just hang out with them. That yeah, I think that just that the value in being somewhere and taking the time to truly observe. I think that's harder and harder to do in our busy lives. And I think that when I'm in that frame of mind to like observe what's going on around me, that's often when I have like the ideas for another project, or be like, this is what fascinates me. Um, I don't know if that was an answer to your question.
Being present. I mean, being
Yeah.
present, right? Like, yeah, time is fleeting. There's so many things that you could focus on, but yeah, death is inevitable. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting. I guess I don't spend too much time thinking about death currently, but did it make you think a lot more about death?
What I learned was that I had this idea of like I want to make something about cryonics, and was really fighting against like just not really sensing um, that there was a film, like but continuing trying to like go and film these other people, and like um, but my gut was telling me like I can't sense this, like this doesn't excite me. But I think I was forcing it, and I think I have kind of learned to like trust in the process and be like, okay, um, if you're still open enough, and it I think when I've met NASA the first time, I had to like show the test material to someone else, and they were like, look, you should definitely like just the film has to be about them. Like I think I was struggling like because I'd filmed all these other people. I was like, "Oh, maybe, he could be one character of many people," um, and just yeah, like, not closing doors for yourself because you feel, like, locked, or, um, I think often these kind of things happen, like, gifts occur, and if you're too occupied with, like, what something should be, or, like, a set idea about what something was, like, sometimes you can miss the most important, like, discoveries that are right in front of your nose.
I think that's a fair point. And it always helps to have friends to watch your things because sometimes it just starts to become a crazy echo chamber of like one person or two people, just like the director and the producer just watching the same stuff over and over again. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a fresh pair of eyes help. Awesome. Well, I want to talk about making docs in Europe. And I know you mentioned like you choosing to live in Denmark is maybe more sustainable than some other countries. What for those that like don't that maybe are looking for a place to live as a documentary filmmaker, what is your take on, being in Denmark and making films?
I mean, it's a social democracy where, um, England was like that at one point in time, but it's just gradually moved towards the kind of American model. And all of these state-funded institutions, like once you begin cutting them, it's very rare that it goes in the opposite direction. So Denmark is a rare case where they have a film institute whose job it is to support, um, you know, films that have an interest for the public good, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be seen by the maximum amount of people. It could also be that it can enrich, you know, something culturally, and even if there's like, very small amount of people seeing it, it can still have a value. So I think that seeing films in that way and not as a commercial object to be traded and sold, I think is gives you an enormous freedom, which is a real privilege compared to America, where it is like the value is in the viewership really, or like um and even PBS is not like, there's still backers and funders and like
Yeah.
it's um
Yeah.
so I think that's what makes it unique, and the fact that someone like Joshua Oppenheimer, he moved here as well because he met a Danish producer, and he's never made a film in Denmark. Like his two films take place in Indonesia, and the most recent one takes place all over the world. And so I think that it's a very small country of 5 million people, so you have to look like beyond your borders. And I mean, yeah, if people are considering moving here, it is a bonus to speak the language, and you can't just kind of parachute in and
Right.
get the money and run. But I mean,
Right.
co-production is a possibility. Like if you and with all European countries, like if you do a co-production, you can find a producer in that country, and if it makes sense to like, yeah, the money that you get, you have to spend in the country. So that could be doing the post production. If you know a good editor, there's plenty of good editors in Denmark, or the sound design or something. So that's that. Like most European films are funded in that way. Of like, that's the flip side to it not being commercial, is like you're not making the money back. Like uh you get a kind of stipend of the budget, but you're not seeing big bucks. And if they do come, then like the film institute is the one who's going to be taking that first.
Benefiting from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any like major style differences, whether it be like visually or even like storytelling wise or perspective wise, that your experiences from European filmmakers to American filmmakers?
um I guess there's like the general, difference between European cinema and American cinema, and that America is has come out of Hollywood and the European tradition. There was, we don't need to go into the whole film school of like film history 101, but um like a more avant-garde style, like slower, less resolved. I think all the, um fewer happy endings. um but in Denmark, I mean, just compared to England, like they're both European countries, but England is much more driven by kind of convention, and the films that I grew up watching were there was kind of an agreed standard about um, the language, whereas I think Denmark has always been um, creatively like more of a risk taker, and they're the ones that made the whole like Dogma 95 movement. And I think right from like the schooling system, you're more encouraged to like challenge the system, whereas in England at least it's like discipline, like follow the rules. So um of course there's a lot, that's what I'm trying to say, within Europe there's a lot of differences, and French cinema is completely different, and Germany is like a whole market for itself, where it's all been like dubbed badly with German actors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So um,
Hard to
I
compare
think,
perfectly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But for the small size of the country, there's a lot of interesting. outward looking documentaries coming out of Denmark, I would say.
Nice. Okay, one other question I have before we jump into our rapid fire questions, which is the movie poster of Eternal Father is also like a clip as well, and it seems like he's underwater. I just want to like talk about like if someone is looking to, shoot something similar, they're inspired by the visual of it. Can you tell us how you put this together?
Sure. I wanted to visualize this state of suspension somehow, and obviously I wasn't able to go and film him after that takes place. So I was thinking about how can you visualize this in an abstract way, and I was really inspired by this artist called Bill Viola, um, who does like ultra slow motion kind of moving portraits of people often underwater. Um, and I just thought that, like, it was kind of it the feeling that it evoked in me, it felt like I was witnessing them in the moment that they had died. Um, and I we tried many different methods of, like, filming in, like, a big, like, fish tank, in a studio, but there was, like, a lot of weird reflections, and so we ended up just hiring this small swimming pool, and then you kind of drape the bottom with, like, black drapes, and then, like, build a rig above the pool, and, I mean, I showed the family, like, some references of what I wanted to do, and I think that's a beautiful thing about them is that they were like, "Yeah, like, sure." Like, I think that by that time, they trusted me enough
Yeah.
to, like, that was the
Hold their
last
breath
thing that we did
underwater
together.
and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, actually, they had
Awesome.
nose plugs in,
Okay.
which we VFX'd out,
Mm,
because otherwise you just have water going into your nose,
right. That's a good
yeah.
point. Okay. Is there any other fun things you want to share about that? So like black tarp on the bottom, it seems like you could VFX some plugs out. Any other tips for people that might want to replicate a similar shot?
I mean, I've done stuff before where I'm filming people with a camera underwater, and that's definitely more complicated.
Mm.
Um, but this time, I think there was one um, like backlight under the water, but otherwise the lights were above. It's obviously like a lot safer and a lot easier if the light is outside of the water. Um, I just found a really experienced gaffer who has done like the Harry Potter films. Um, yeah, and I've worked with him twice, and we're talking like very low budget. And I think he's the kind of guy who um, he just wants to give back to like the next generation of filmmakers. So that was like really fortunate that he was up for coming along. And I think it's a lot of it is due to him because for him it's just like very simple, Um, but I think it's also in both cases we've been filming children underwater. Then I think it's also about how to make an environment where it's fun and playful and like it's not like a scary thing and making them feel relaxed enough to like, I think you can sense it if someone's like um clenched up or like relaxed. I think the most difficult thing was the youngest daughter who's 6. Like she didn't really want to get submerged under the water, so her like she's kind of like semi submerged. um yeah. I would
But hey,
just
it
My
worked.
advice would
You
be,
figured it
yeah.
out.
Yeah,
What
thank
were you
you,
gonna
yeah.
say? What were you gonna say
Yeah, my
about the
advice would
advice?
be to, if you wanna do that, just find someone with plenty of experience, because it's hard to, like, playing around with that water tank, we just made so many stupid errors that, like, he was just able to, you know
Troubleshoot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. All right, time for our rapid fire questions. So, if you weren't a filmmaker, what would you be doing?
Good question. Maybe anthropologist?
Okay. Email or call?
Email.
Okay. One filmmaker that influences your work.
Um, Mark Isaacs.
Latest documentary you enjoyed?
Mistress Dispeller by Elizabeth Lowe.
Okay, I haven't watched that one. Are you most creative in the morning or at night?
At night, unfortunately.
Who else should I have on this podcast?
Liz Lowe. She's a documentary filmmaker. She went to Stanford. Her latest film hasn't come out yet, but it's called The Mistress Dispeller, about a woman in China who is kind of hired by couples where one of the partners is having an affair to infiltrate, almost like a private detective, and subtly convince the person to leave their partner. It's an incredibly cinematic film, and she's an amazing filmmaker. So you should get her on.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. If you like this episode, take a screenshot of it, tag Talk Doc to me, so that way we know that you enjoyed it and I can make more episodes like this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. Bye.